Congress and Dwight D. Eisenhower passed the Federal Aid Highway Act in 1956 to fund the construction of a national interstate highway system in America. This connected the entire country, provided a way to efficiently travel from coast to coast, and boosted the economy exponentially. The word road during the founding of America hardly meant the same thing that it does today. Post-Revolutionary War, colonies were few and roads were dirt and gravel pathways for carriages, wagons, and pedestrians. Most people worked locally because there was no way to travel long distances in short amounts of time. The quickest way of travel remained mainly via water, so there was no need for a road system. However, even George Washington saw the need for an efficient road system to have a prosperous nation. Washington stated, "The credit, the saving, and convenience of this country all require that our great roads leading from one public place to another should be straightened and established by law. These things seem indispensably necessary." As the United States moved westward in the 1800s, the foundation of U.S. road systems remained mainly a local operation. However, the common belief remained that a road system was unnecessary. The local governments determined the shape, layout, and materials. Local control led to different road materials, such as bricks and gravel, which suited wagon wheels, shoes, and hooves, but would prove problematic for car tires. By the 1930s, people needed to be able to make nationwide journeys to pursue employment. Interstate employment now seemed possible with advances in electricity, combustion engines, and assembly lines that led to increased automobile ownership during the early 1900s. The Federal Aid Road Act of 1916, created under Woodrow Wilson, provided funding for a road system in rural areas. Still, it needed to be advanced enough to travel throughout the United States. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt noticed a need for an efficient interstate travel system. He expressed interest in a new act that would go further than Wilson's Road Act, an act to build a system of toll superhighways that would connect the country from the east to the west coast. This idea was discarded, however, for its impracticality and lack of funding. However, it resulted in the National Interregional Highway Committee, which investigated the need for an interstate highway system. In 1919, Lieutenant Colonel Dwight David Eisenhower secured a place on a transcontinental military convoy from Washington, D.C. to San Francisco, California, over a span of around 2 months, or 62 days. This was in order to test the condition of roads in America to transport military vehicles across the country. The convoy proved to participants that the national road system was not prepared to support the military's vehicles. Later on, Dwight D. Eisenhower, coming home from World War II, compared Germany's Autobahn with the United States' inefficient road system. Eisenhower later talked of his experiences regarding roads, saying, "The old convoy had started me thinking about good 2-lane highways, but Germany had made me see the wisdom of broader ribbons across the land." Eisenhower supported and addressed the act in several public appearances, answering questions about the system. Eisenhower also assembled the Clay Committee to gather cost estimates and funding for the construction of the system. The committee determined that the system's production would increase traffic volumes and gasoline consumption, paying off the government debt from the project. They developed a system similar to Roosevelt's, yet much more extensive. However, it faced pushback from city planners, railroad companies, and congressmen who were apprehensive about the high cost. Before the Clay Committee's proposal would reach Congress, Senator Albert Gore Sr. created his bill to continue the Federal Aid Highway Program. This bill opted for a more conservative plan instead of the fairly costly Clay Committee plan. Congress approved Gore's bill in 1955, although it had some production issues. Representative George Fallon knew that if the Clay Committee planned to pass, it would need revisions. He would have to draft a new bill. Fallon's bill included tax increases for highway users, with the money to fund the program. Due to the use of the system for military purposes, it was named the National System of Interstate and Defense Highways. Fallon's bill was defeated alongside the Clay Committee's plan. Fallon revised his bill to decrease the bond size, becoming a pay-as-you-go approach, and Eisenhower endorsed the bill. After several alterations, the Gore and Fallon bills merged into the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956, which the Senate and the House approved. The final passage of the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956 allocated billions of dollars from the federal government and state governments over a decade. This system provided superhighways connected to existing roads to create a national web of roads capable of transporting a vehicle nearly anywhere in the country. This act was one of the most extensive infrastructure programs in American history. Secretary of Commerce Sinclair Weeks called the Federal Aid Highway Act the greatest public works program in the history of the world. The short-term impact of this act had offered a significant expansion to the United States highway system. The highway system was now due to be extended to 41,000 miles over 13 years to fund the construction of the system. Gas taxes increased until the debt was paid for. This act brought forth a new way of transport and boosted job opportunities efficiently and at a low cost. People could now have jobs farther away from their homes because commute times were shorter. As a result, the interstate highway system contributed to an exponential increase in productivity between 1950 to 1989. This system also boosted suburbanization, which had a both positive and negative impact. For instance, suburban city planners and homeowners may say that the change could ease transport to new homes for homeowners. In contrast, urban city planners may note that the difference could further disperse residents of large cities. This act is not without fault, however. The construction of the interstate system caused an immense decrease in railroad travel figures. After the act's passing and subsequent construction of the system, railroad passenger travel declined to as little as 5% of travelers. Railroad companies weren't able to get rid of their trains very quickly or easily. This caused an enormous deficit of $500 million after the act's passing, and railroad companies ended up abandoning their trains. In the 21st century, nearly 70 years later, there are more newfound perspectives regarding the interstate highway system's long-term effects than ever before. The increase in traffic as a result of the system poses the threat of global warming stemming from high carbon emissions from combustion engines. The act has also been heavily criticized for upending several communities, with construction displacing up to 475,000 households and dividing cities into halves. For example, in Syracuse, New York, the 15th Ward was decimated by the construction of Interstate 81 in the 1960s. I-81 created unfavorable conditions for residents in the surrounding area, and property values plummeted, effectively forcing the area into a state of low-income housing. The act's impact on the United States cannot be understated, for it is one of the most significant projects in U.S. history. It was said in 1990, at the 50th anniversary of the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956's passing, of all his domestic programs, Eisenhower's favorite, by far, was the interstate system, as well as then-President George Bush signed legislation to change the program's name to the Dwight D. Eisenhower System of Interstate and Defense Highways, to honor Eisenhower's important role in securing the creation of the interstate highway system. It was said in one of Eisenhower's memoirs, Mandate for Change, 1953 to 1956, more than any single action by the government since the end of the war, this one would change the face of America. Its impact on the American economy, the jobs it would produce in manufacturing and construction, the rural areas it would open up, was beyond calculation. This act would forever be associated with Eisenhower's legacy as one of the biggest American infrastructure acts. This act helped to slingshot the United States into a new era of economic growth and transportation, and created more jobs than any other single act in American history. It showcases how powerful the United States government can be when it is united and willing to work together.